So if you guys are wondering why I'm not in my typical setup, it's because I'm actually getting married this week and I'm on vacation. So I just watched the brand new episode of The Mandalorian in here, and it was great. Today we're going to be breaking down and reviewing The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 7. And this episode did a complete 180 from last week. We got so much plot development, we got tons of returning characters, and I think we've actually set up a pretty decent finale. I was definitely wrong about some theories I had in the last video breakdown, but I'm actually super excited about it, because something else is actually hinted at in this episode, and we're going to get to it. Before that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for 300 subscribers. I can't believe I have that many subscribers already. So if you're brand new to this channel and want to join our tight-knit community, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. Most importantly, go down to the comments and leave your thoughts. I love reading them, I will read them, and I most likely will respond. As per usual, we're going to break down the episode and then I'm going to give my thoughts. This episode starts out on Coruscant, and man, I love seeing the underworld here. We see the nightlife, we see the crime, we see everything. We actually follow Elia Kane from a previous episode where she is on Coruscant meeting with Moff Gideon. She calls Moff Gideon and lets him know that, hey, the Mandalorians are grouping back together on Mandalore. Elia tells Gideon that Dr. Pershing is being taken care of, and Gideon is kind of somewhat afraid. Not in the fear sense, but he doesn't want the Mandalorians to regroup on Mandalore for specific reasons. And that specific reason is something that I called a while ago. We then see Moff Gideon go through this laser room with all of these jet trooper guards, and these laser force fields reminded me so much of the Phantom Menace final duel. We then see all of these holograms of Imperial officers. Gideon is talking to them and is sort of their leader for the moment, because they actually bring up Grand Admiral Thrawn multiple times and are reminding Gideon that his return is imminent. But Gideon doesn't necessarily believe this and thinks he should take the charge while he is not here. The other Imperial officers aren't necessarily down with this because they know Thrawn is coming back, but they don't really have a choice because the Mandalorians are going to Mandalore and they're going to find something. I love the hints at Thrawn here. I think it's going to be epic, and I think we might actually see him in the finale. It would be so crazy if that actually did happen. Another thing I want to point out is that these Imperial officers are meeting in secret. It's really interesting. It's a yin and yang situation because we've seen the rebellion do the exact same thing, meeting together in small groups to overthrow their larger government. And the former Imperials here are doing the same thing. Kind of two sides of the same coin. I thought it was really interesting and I really enjoyed it. The opening credits then roll and we find out this episode is titled The Spies. Now, who are the spies? Well, we'll talk about that. We open up on Navarro and we see this giant Imperial ship enter the sky. And while the ship is Imperial, it's actually got the Mythosaur brand all over the bottom, and it was so awesome. This is where all the Mandalorians are going to be traveling, and we see Bo-Katan's ship and other Mandalorian ships following it. Because we remember Greef Karga gave a sect of Navarro to the Mandalorians to call their home. So now that all of these Mandalorians are together on Navarro, there's going to be a little bit of tension between them. We see the tribe of the Watch meet the Night Owls, and it's very tense. It was interesting seeing the Watch react to all of them taking their helmets off when they've only known a certain creed where you can't do that. We then catch up with Greef Karga, and he's got a little present for Grogu. This was definitely one of the funniest moments in Star Wars that I think I've ever seen. Greef had the Anzellans rebuild IG-11 and turned him into IG-12. Now, IG-12 just isn't another assassin droid, he is actually just another suit of armor. Well, a metaphorical suit of armor because, you know, the Mandalorians have their armor. This one is a little bit different. Grogu actually goes inside of this IG unit, and one of the funniest things happens. We get our first communication with Grogu, and it's not just him speaking, it's Taika Waititi's voice from the IG unit saying yes and no. He's got these little buttons that, you know, he can say yes or no depending on what he wants. And there's just such a good comedic moment where he keeps saying no, no, no over and over again, and I just felt like the humor really hit. I was actually laughing out loud. I thought it was genius. Because he's this cute little creature and he's having these assertive responses. It doesn't really match, but it makes for great comedy. I also think the IG unit is going to be super cool and do some really awesome things in the finale because we see Grogu moving around in it, but he doesn't necessarily use the Force as much as he has earlier in the episodes. I'm hoping we see a hybrid of Grogu's Force abilities mixed with the assassin droid's weaponry. Both tribes of Mandalorians are prepping to leave Navarro and go to Mandalore, and we kind of get a Captain America moment from Bo-Katan. She delivers her words, we get this resolution with Din about how he doesn't really want the Darksaber, he never really did. He just wants, you know, what's best for his people. And yeah, I mean, that's all he ever wanted. Did I want Din to control the Darksaber and become the king of Mandalore? Yeah, of course I did. But now that they've actually flat out said it, and we know the motives of these people, it makes sense. We actually find out here what happened between Bo-Katan and Moff Gideon, and why he ends up with the Darksaber in the first place. Back when Mandalore fell, Bo-Katan sacrificed the Darksaber and her Mandalorian rule to save her people when the Imperials were bombing Mandalore. Moff Gideon told Bo-Katan if she surrendered, if she gave him the Darksaber, he would spare her people. But of course he didn't. And this explains why Bo-Katan has been so hesitant to trust anybody, why she's been so hell-bent on seeing Moff Gideon and getting her revenge. Because yes, she did a superheroic thing by trying to save her people, but she didn't reap any of the rewards from doing so. We get great unity between the Watch and the Night Owls, and it really seems like everybody's coming together as a team, and there are a lot more Mandalorians than I thought there were. Which is cool, they sort of have an army now with Bo-Katan and sort of Din as their leaders. And the Armorer, but there's something really fishy going on with the Armorer. We travel to Mandalore and we get another one of those drop sequences where all the Mandalorians fall from the ship, and I just think it looks fantastic. This is movie quality stuff. I say it every single week, and I'm just so glad that we're getting to see movie quality things in a project that people really care about. It is still using the volume technology, but like I've said before, it works super well in Star Wars, and I think they should continue using it for sort of the setting. Maybe not so much with props and action sets, but just, setting in general and showing the planets, I think it works great. They're traveling on Mandalore, and we actually see another ship come up upon them. This is sort of like Jabba's sail barge, but a more makeshift version. And for some reason, it reminded me a lot of Rex and Wolf's little vehicle from Rebels. It's sort of put together. It's not necessarily a complete ship. It's bits and parts and pieces. We find out that the people piloting this little vessel are Mandalorians who never left Mandalore during the Purge and the bombings. They actually know Bo-Katan, and they bow down to her immediately. Their whole goal throughout this episode is to find the Great Forge underneath the ruins of Mandalore. And it seems like when doing so, they're bringing their group together even more than they thought they would, because they're finding all of these straggling Mandalorians and bringing them all together, which is kind of the point of the whole journey in general. It's also helping their journey because the Mandalorians they met on Mandalore know where the Forge is. And earlier in this episode, Bo-Katan actually gives a really, really good line. She says that Mandalore doesn't just fall to their enemies. They always rise up again when it comes to their enemies. It's actually the house that crumbles upon itself. It's the Mandalorians that cause the Mandalorians to fall. And we've seen this time and time again with the different tribes, the Watch, Death Watch, the Night Owls, the Mandalorians. The only time Mandalorians have really had a ton of trouble is when they are split up and fighting themselves as well as their enemies. And I thought it was a really great line that Bo-Katan threw out there, and it really deepened the plot for me. So they're traveling along, and we actually see Paz and Axe fight. And this harkens back to that line that I was just talking about, because these two are fighting each other when they should be working together. It's quite an entertaining fight. Again, the fight choreography in the season has been superb. And while none of the other Mandalorians can step in, Grogu actually is the one who steps in the IG unit and stops them and separates them. And of course, he clicks the little no button. Now, during this time, the Armorer takes Bo-Katan's ship up into space to get everybody else to come down to Mandalore and tell them that it's safe or whatever. But it's peculiar that she is not with the group when certain things happen. They immediately get attacked by this giant monster, and again, the creature design in this series has always been top-notch, and takes a crazy idea and makes it look realistic somehow. And seeing all of these Mandalorians like ants fighting this giant creature was something to watch, and it was amazing. They make it down to the mine and they find more Mandalorians. But they're actually not. They are the jet troopers that we saw at the beginning of the episode from Moff Gideon. They start attacking them, and I was wondering, why are they already here? We get some really great fighting, some great combat, some great action, and then they arrive at sort of this facility. Now, I called this way earlier on in this season. I knew that there was some sort of lie behind Mandalore and its demise. I knew there was no way that this planet was completely empty and nobody was on it. And what do you know? We find out here that the Imperials have set up camp here, and they've been doing things for a long time. We see these cloning vats from earlier in the episode. We see all of this Imperial tech, TIE fighters, bombers, etc. This has been here for a lot longer than we think. And maybe it was the Imperial's idea to let everybody know that Mandalore was completely desolate, completely empty, nothing's going on here, you can't go there, it's cursed. And I'm just so happy that I got something right. The group ends up getting split up by a blast door, and we see Moff Gideon arrive and capture Din. He jettisons down with his jetpack, and we see his helmet. Now, his helmet is very, very similar to the Armorer's. How is it similar? Well, it's got the horns. Similar to the Mandalorians, it's got those exact horns on top, and I have to say his design looks super badass. Moff Gideon tells Bo-Katan that she needs to surrender the Darksaber, because actually what he wants is to control everybody and be the leader of all of the people, and reignite the Empire. And I just kept thinking about this suit and how it's very specific and how it's super similar to an actual Mandalorian armor set. So is he a Mandalorian? I don't know. Maybe we'll get some answers to that question in the finale. But it's very odd that the armor's design is very similar to Moff Gideon's, and the fact that she is, for some reason, away from the group when all of this is happening, it's very, very suspicious. I've sort of shifted my suspicion from Bo-Katan to the armorer now because she's just been sketchy this entire time. Moff Gideon takes Din Djarin away, and we have to see Bo-Katan and all the other Mandalorians, including Paz Vizsla, including the Night Owls, including everybody who has basically come together at this point, fight off the Imperial forces as one. Bo-Katan uses the Darksaber to cut a big hole in the blast doors so they can escape, but Paz Vizsla ends up having to stay behind to fend off the other stormtroopers. Paz has got this great fight scene where he just takes on all of these stormtroopers, not being phased, just a total powerhouse. He's clotheslining them, he's taking them all down. Sometimes he doesn't even need a weapon, he just charges them and kills them with brute force. But at the beginning of the episode, Moff Gideon didn't only order TIE fighters and TIE bombers to Mandalore, he actually ordered Praetorian guards. Now, the first time we saw these guards was in The Last Jedi, and they make their triumphant return here. And they looked so much better, in my opinion. Similar to how the Dark Troopers looked at the end of the Season 2 Mandalorian. Yeah, they were just kind of robots, but their presence was just menacing. It's the same thing here. Paz Vizsla has to take all three of them on, and it is just too much for him to handle, and he ends up succumbing to his wounds. The Praetorian guards barely put an effort towards them. We realize these guys are way more powerful than anybody had thought they would be. And the worst part of it all is none of the Mandalorians saw them, so they don't even know that these guys are coming. But Paz's sacrifice really allowed Bo-Katan and everybody else to escape, similar to what Luke does at the end of The Last Jedi. And that's the end of the episode. We end on a really big cliffhanger, not knowing what is actually going to happen. It gives sort of a hint, but nothing super concrete. In the finale, I really just hope to see the Mythosaur. I hope to see some sort of traitor, because the episode here is called The Spy, and we don't really see any sort of spy except for Elia Kane at the beginning. So I'm really hoping that they do a twist here and have the Armorer be the main villain. It would be an interesting twist, and I want to know what her motivations would be if she was in fact a traitor. Was her whole goal to get Bo-Katan there so Moff Gideon could get the Darksaber again? These are questions I hope we have answers to in the finale, and it's just 1 week away. Overall, I really loved this episode a lot more than the previous week's episode, and I really have to give credit to Rick Famuyiwa for directing this episode because it gave me everything. We got interesting plot points that weren't just one-offs, they wasn't just one and done. We got beautiful action sequences, we got a menacing villain, we have intrigue. This is what we should have gotten maybe a little bit earlier. I do like this season a lot. I just wish this part would have been sort of towards the middle or things like this. Because spending time with our antagonist and our protagonist all together is what makes for a compelling conflict. Do they have a lot to really wrap up in this finale? Sort of. There isn't too much at stake here because we're only getting to see Moff Gideon back in the picture for this episode alone. And we only have one episode to tie it up when he just returned, so I'm hoping they're able to pull it off and really give a compelling story, but we're still missing out a little bit on the relationship between Din and Grogu, and Bo-Katan has actually been the centerpiece for this whole season. And honestly, I'm fine with it. I love Bo-Katan as a character. That's why I was so theory heavy on her maybe being an antagonist, because I saw that she was getting so much spotlight, and I thought maybe they were going to twist it somehow. But if she is going to be truthful and she is going to be the leader of the Mandalorians, I'm all for it. Because she's an action-packed heroine who is really taking center stage and has a heavy presence. And of course we know her from other series as well, so we already have that connection with her. I want to see Grogu do a little bit more in this finale, and I want to see Din and Grogu have some moments together because we haven't really got any of that this season. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Like I said earlier, if you comment, I'm most likely going to respond, and make sure you hit that subscribe button on your way out, and let's get us to 400 subs. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very, very soon.